This Russian Tier 10 heavy tank, known as the IS-4, is an incredibly strong vehicle. It's actually one of the best Tier 10 heavies currently in the game. It's got pretty good mobility, going upwards of 40 kilometers per hour. Fantastic frontal armor, and a huge slap of hit points. And when you add all those together, plus the pretty good gun that it has, it is such a good vehicle because it can basically work any scenario. Now imagine that type of flexibility, but change out the IS-4's gun for 560 damage per shot, 152 millimeter. Well, that's basically what the new Polish Tier 10 heavy tank, the 60 TP, will be when it comes into the game. Now, of course, it is currently about to enter testing. So what that means is these statistics I'm about to show you are, yes, correct, but they could be subject to change in the future, depending on if the vehicle's performing too well or underperforming at the same time. So we're going to be breaking into everything you need to know. Now, this is the tank, the 60 TP Lawandoeskigo. I don't know how to pronounce that, but we're just going to call it the 60 TP. It's a very nice looking vehicle, and as I did just show you for the IS-4, they look very, very similar on design. And I have a feeling that was probably intended in real life, as they were probably based off Soviet vehicles. But in World of Tanks Blitz, this thing has got some chunky armor, as you can see a little bit of a sneak peek right there. Pretty dang impressive. But we're first of all going to talk about the statistics. A lot of people try comparing this vehicle to the E100, another super heavy with a very high alpha. In my opinion, it's not really comparable to an E100. The E100 has more hit points and it's got a higher alpha. And of course, we didn't know the alpha was going to be less, but even if it did have the same alpha damage as an E100, it doesn't perform the same role. An E100 has huge hit points, and it's just a massive tank that's supposed to be this frontline buffer that smashes into enemy opponents. You're not going to be doing that in the 60 TP. It's more like an IS-4 Peekaboo playstyle. So it is going to be a very different playstyle in my opinion, and that's why I didn't compare it to the E100. I compared it to the IS-4. So that's something I wanted to cover right off the bat. But getting into it, it does have a pretty healthy hit point pool at 2600 base, and if you're running the improved assembly, you're able to bring it up to 2756. That means that, yeah, you actually are going to be able to take quite a bit of sustained fire. Not to mention, its damage per minute, while quite poor, it's not awful, I guess. Like, it's 2418. It's definitely very poor for Tier 10 heavy tanks. The only vehicle that is worse would be the Kronvang, which has, I think, about 2200, it says on Blitzhanger. But the Kron, of course, has an auto-reloading gun, which makes up for much of that poor DPM, where this vehicle doesn't. It just has a single-shot gun. But the reason I don't think the DPM is actually that poor is because, again, it does have huge alpha at 560 per shot, which means that you're going to be more like a peekaboo playstyle. You're going to just snap somebody and back in the cover. So you're not going to have to worry too much about the damage per minute. And what's nice is that even though it doesn't have the best reload, it's still only about a 13.89 second reload because it does have about 60 or 80 less alpha damage than the E100 and other 152 millimeter based guns. So actually, it's going to be a similar and comparable reload to an E100. Not too bad there. Now, the penetration on the standard at 258 is pretty solid. It's nothing fantastic, but it'll be plenty to cut through most Tier 10 frontal armor, unless you're aiming at, IS-4s. But if you got to load that heat at 330, and if you put on calibrated 363, yeah, penetration is not a struggle whatsoever on this vehicle. You're easily going to be cutting through any frontal armor. That's something that's very nice. Now, the HE Alpha is 680, which is actually quite strong. The Kampfpanzers is 640, so it is a bit nicer. It's not like the T-49s, but it's still good enough to get some nice shells in. Man, imagine trying to pronounce that HE shell. Posiska Wotb. Yeah, I can't pronounce that at all. Why did they name the... Holy moly, look at that AB name. What is the heat? Oh my god. Well, yes, I'm just going to say yes, and we're going to continue scrolling down. Now, a nice thing is the crew damage. It has 203. In fact, it's the same as the E100, meaning that if you shoot track wheels or if you hit an ammo rack, you have a much higher chance of detonating that ammo rack than you would in basically any other vehicle apart from other 152 millimeters, as it does carry a 152. Now, a great thing about the 152 is even though it doesn't carry that 640 damage per shot, you still, with 3 calibers rule, overmatch any 50 millimeter plating, which is great. So that means bat chat side armor, sheesh, right through it, no problem whatsoever. Now, here are some issues. The gun handling is very poor at 2.63-second aiming time. Yeah, that's not great because, of course, Blitzhanger uses the PC variable. So this in total is probably going to be over a 5-second aiming time. As well, the dispersion at 0.362 is basically the same as an E100. So yeah, not great there, but it's kind of what we expected. Dispersion factors while moving are terrible. Dispersion factors while rotating the turret are also terrible. But I guess it basically is, after looking at the E100 on movement dispersion as well, this gun is basically the same as an E100, which does make sense. It's a high alpha, and you don't want this vehicle being extremely accurate. Imagine getting snapped across the map by a super heavy. Yeah, probably wouldn't be the best day of your life. Now, one thing that I did notice is actually very poor shell velocity at 900. Now, it's not as bad as the 757 that the E100 carries, but it's not great. You know, you're going to be having to either one supercharge for some people or definitely lead your shots quite a bit. But judging that this vehicle is going to be a semi-frontline tank, you're probably not going to have to worry too much about that. Gun depression is great. That's actually fantastic. 7 degrees is plenty to work basically any ridgeline that you're on, and that's good enough for me, so I'll take 7 degrees any day of the week. Mobility, the tank weighs a lot. It's 60 tons, and that's why I think it's called the 60 TP. With that huge tonnage, it goes forward at 32 kilometers per hour, which is quite slow. It's not as slow as the 100, but it is quite slow. Reverse speed, though, at 15, that's pretty sweet. That means you're going to be able to reverse very quickly out of cover, or into cover, should I say. You know, if you're getting shot at in the front, you got to snap a shot and back up. That's something that this vehicle is going to be very nice at, further suiting that peek-a-boom playstyle. The effective power-to-weight ratio is 10.69. Yeah, it's not great, but judging that the vehicle only goes 30, I don't think it's really going to be too bad either. You'll probably get up to top speed in about maybe 5, 6, 7 seconds, so not terrible there. Traverse speed at 29 degrees a second, it's pretty bad. It's about the same as a WZ-113, and as we know, I hate the 113's traverse speed, but the difference is this is more of a super heavy playstyle than it would be, you know, a 113 pepper the enemy with smaller alpha. So I don't think it's actually going to be too bad on the traverse speed, especially because the turret traverse speed is 20.65. That is, again, very poor, but when you add them together, I think that you're going to be able to hit most medium tanks on the move as it is, so not too much of a worry. But you still can be circled by light tanks. Bat chats can come up behind you, and with those two very poor values, yeah, it will be quite an easy vehicle to get behind and distract. That concealment, yeah, it's not great. It's 12.5%. Didn't expect to have good concealment anyway, so yeah, it's nothing too spectacular there. But you'll notice this vehicle actually seems very well balanced. I give Wargaming a great amount of credit right now. If they lift this vehicle completely the way it is, I honestly think that it would be fine the way it is currently coming into the game. It seems like the DPM kind of suits the amount of alpha it has. It's not too high in the damage per minute where you're just going to rip into other heavy tanks, but it's also not too low to make it useless. So I think it's pretty dang balanced. And wait until you see this frontal armor. This is where it really is incredible. Now that upper plate is 312 millimeters thick. And if you're loading heat, because of course heat doesn't have that shell normalization, it's incredibly thick, 340 base. And that means, remember, this thing has 7 degrees of gun depression. Using that gun depression, that upper plate is 500 millimeters thick. Yeah, good luck getting through that. It's incredibly thick when you look at it. Now, it does have a weak spot. This part right in the middle is very, very easy to penetrate, especially with heat. You can see easily overmatched. So that is where you always want to shoot at this vehicle. It's just like that in World of Tanks PC, so you want to do the same thing here. But as well, it looks like you do got some weak spots when it is hull down on the turret, but I'm not too sure how weak that's going to be when it's actually in battle. But overall, this thing looks like it has some pretty solid armor. Fully hull down, if you're looking at somebody like this, you snap it, you can easily back straight up. And look at that turret armor. That's incredibly thick. 560 ranging upwards of 600. That mantlet, you're never ever going to cut through that thing. It's a huge chunky mantlet, as you can see. So yeah, the turret on this tank is incredibly thick. Now, it does have a cupola right here at 180 millimeters thick, and it does look to be a sizable cupola. If you're fully hull down, it still is very apparent to shoot, so you might want to stick your gun up and try and block that, because with that big mantlet, it is going to be quite easy to block. But Yeah, it does look like it's got some big weaknesses. You know, that lower plate's very easy to pen. Now, thankfully, it is a very small lower plate, and because of that and the steep angle, you can also get some really, really troll bounces on that if you angle it correctly. So that's something that's nice. Side armor, it's pretty bad, actually. The sides are about 110 millimeters thick at weakest, so you will very easily be able to penetrate the sides of this vehicle if you have it exposed. The side of the turret as well is very, very weak. The rear of the tank at 99 and 96 means that at least you won't be penned by any high explosive shells on the rear, and same for the rear of the turret at 104. So the armor is quite strong. I've looked at the armor with my friend in a training room as we're able to mod the tanks, and it looks pretty strong. I think that honestly, hull down, this is going to be an incredibly fearsome tank, especially with that penetration. Basically think of this, in my opinion, as a Kampfpanzer with more turret armor, and that's it. Basically the same penetration, just a tier higher. But let me know what you guys think about this vehicle in the game. Do you think that it looks pretty balanced right now, or does it look underpowered? In my opinion, it looks very well balanced. Pantufoli agrees, and I just think Wargaming actually did a pretty solid job. Hopefully, all of you enjoyed today's video. If you would like to see more like it, please consider smashing that subscribe button down below. But other than that, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.